Hey everyone, I'm Jay Shear, and welcome to Business Minds Coffee Chat. The goal of this show is to share insights, help to lift and inspire others, and deliver practical, meaningful, and actionable content. You know that feeling when you make a discovery or have an aha moment that radically changes your life? Our guest today had that experience when, after a failed business venture, he found himself broken, broke, and homeless with his pregnant wife to care for. Trying desperately to find a solution to his current situation, he discovered a selling system that enabled him to make over $2 million in sales in the first 6 months and over $100 million in the last 9 years. How did he do it? Well, get pen and paper ready because we're diving in today with the founder and CEO of Social Dynamic Selling, author of the #1 bestseller, Food for Thought, and the host of the Sales Conversion Podcast, Rylee Meek. Rylee, great to see you.
Hey, Jay. Happy to be here, man. This is going to be fun. Looking forward to this.
Yes, sir. You and me both. Well, thank you so much for being here today. And why don't we start by if you could share with our audience a thumbnail sketch of your background, the pain that you experienced, Rylee, and the catalyst for the work that you're doing today.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I grew up in small town, South Dakota, Jay. And when I say small, I mean small, like less than 1,000 people there. And my very first job that I ever had was I was 15 at the time, and it was the only option in this small town was to make pizza at our little local gas station there. So I thought, yeah, I can do that. I want to make a little bit of money, buy the car, get the girlfriend. It's like you're 15-year-old, right? So I took that job, and at the time it was minimum wage, which was $5.15 an hour. And I worked 1 8-hour shift, and I ended up doing the math in my head. And I thought, man, there's no way in heck I'm doing that again. And that really kind of started that entrepreneurial journey that I really ultimately went down. And I had to seek out a number of different mentors and coaches and just be intentional about surrounding myself with the right people. Because there wasn't a lot, there's not a lot of opportunity going on when you come from a town of 1,000 people, right? So I found myself driving, once a month up to Minneapolis area where I reside now, just to seek out those different mentors and surround myself with those mindsetted people, we'll call it. And if you fast forward, a few years to there, literally the day I graduated high school, I ended up moving up here, had a number of different sales gigs, always as like an independent contractor, had kind of that entrepreneurial, drive or spirit to it. I'd made a decent amount of money, and at the age of 23, I found myself going after a business opportunity in Mexico, of all places. And I ended up leasing out my condo that I had here in Minneapolis. And I essentially moved down to Mexico for 5 months. For 5 full months, we were working really hard at this opportunity, and things were going really well. However, on that 5th month, we got the bad news that the government said, we're not allowing you guys to operate here anymore, and you guys got to head back to the States. And so we were, on a flight back to the States here, and I had that aha moment you'd mentioned, but it wasn't a good one. It was one where that I had this realization that, business that failed, we weren't able to operate there anymore. But I also had that realization that you mentioned. I'd leased out my condo. So not only was I broke and, invested everything I had, but I was essentially homeless as well. So my wife and I found ourselves sleeping on my sister's couch and just looking for that next opportunity, what I was going to do. Because at the time, as you'd mentioned, my wife, we were pregnant. And so not only was I, homeless, broke, looking for that next opportunity, and just that struggle of not only am I, how do I provide for my wife and I, but our baby that's on the way, because there's certainly some expenses that come along with that. And I found myself actually just kind of soul searching during this time period. And I ended up looking at Craigslist, of all places, and I came across this little ad, and it was talking about selling to groups of people. And the ad literally said, work 3 days a week and make $10,000. And I thought, yeah, right. Like that sounds way too good to be true. But little did I know this was really the birthing of what you had mentioned now, the social dynamic selling system. Because I'd gone out to this event that this gentleman was hosting who had placed this ad. He was looking to recruit me as a salesman. Mm-hmm. And I'd gone out to this event, and it completely blew my mind because everything that I had done up until this point was always in sales in some fashion, but it was always selling one-on-one, right? Like I would sit down, and sometimes it could be a 20-minute presentation. Sometimes it could be a 3-hour presentation. But it was always just, conversing one-on-one with somebody, taking them from A to Z, and then ultimately asking for the sale. And it blew my mind when I walked into this room, and this gentleman, he had 20 to 25 people in this room. He delivered one presentation. And at the end of it, he simply said, if you'd like to learn more or get the pricing for it, we can schedule one-on-one appointments for the following day. And he ended up getting 7 appointments out of that. And it blew my mind, Jay. I thought, man, if this guy who didn't even do that great of a presentation, in my opinion, but if he can do that and get 7 appointments and then only meet with those people that actually care enough to know what the price would be, or, are curious enough if they could afford it, he literally kind of sifted the sand, right? And he was only meeting with those. So what really rocked my world was like, holy cow, this guy not only leveraged his marketing dollars by putting people in a group setting, but he leveraged his time, right? By doing one presentation. Because as much as I love the idea of that, they always say you earn what you're worth, right? As an independent contractor, you make your own paycheck. And as much as I love that, and I wanted to believe that, I always knew that I was still limited by the amount of time in a day, right? Because I could only, sometimes, it depended upon what I was selling, like that 3-hour presentation, man, you could only do a couple of those in a day before you're just emotionally just drained.
Sure.
And when he did this, and he did one a day and then got 7 actual appointments that basically said, I want to know if I can afford this. I thought, man, I'll do that. I'll do one a day, every single day, and I'll keep my pipeline full. And I took some of his concepts of what he was doing. And then, as you had mentioned, I started my first company back in, this would have been 2011, of doing these group presentations in July of 2011. And then that first 6 months leading into the end of the year, we had done 2.1 million in sales. And it was a fun time, man. It was a very exciting time in life, because not only, did I have a baby coming, on the way, but also I had the ability to provide for my family. And leading into that next year, I ended up recruiting reps or agents throughout the country that would work and do these events as well. I trained them. And by the end of 2012, we had done 12 million in sales. We did the same thing the following year. And it was just like, wow, we really got a machine here, a system in place that allowed me to kind of step back and not have to be in the, working in my business, but I could work on my business and grow. And that really is what allowed us to scale. And now, we've done that. I've started 7 different companies in different industries, and every single one of those we have taken to 7, and a couple of them even 8 figures within the very, very first year of each. And that's, as you had mentioned, how we've done over 100 million in sales in less than the last decade. Wow. 9.5 years or so now.
That's incredible. Love that story. And we're going to continue to delve into that a bit. I want to go back for just a moment though. You talked about the entrepreneurial spirit and that bug kind of bit you pretty early on.
You bet.
Had you had examples of entrepreneurs in your family because you mentioned you had to go to a larger city. So where did that come from? Where was the influence?
Yeah. Growing up, my dad delivered mail, rural route. He was an independent contractor, so not like a postal employee, but he was certainly, his income was capped, right? It's not like he had a business that he was building. My mom pretty much, waited tables or bartended, and I didn't really have a lot of, prime examples. And that's where I really had to seek out different mentors and read books, that just weren't the normal thing to do. And it's just even in South Dakota where I grew up, it's just the town, there was just not that mindset just really wasn't really a thing, right? It's just like you go to school if you're smart enough, you go to college and then you get the salary and you climb the corporate ladder. And that was just like the mindset of people within my town. Right. And so it was, when I looked out across, like, who could I reach out to? Who could I seek out? It's like, I had to be intentional about it and find those type of people. And that's, as I mentioned, caused me to come up to Minnesota and surround myself and seek out those different mentors that could speak into my life and help coach me along this actual journey.
Yeah, fantastic. What did your friends think about this? As you're going through this process and as you're seeking out mentors and coaches and as you're contemplating starting your own business and that drive, what kind of conversations were they having with you?
Yeah, it was interesting because the first couple of years of high school, when 14, 15, I was a freshman, sophomore. I was going down a wrong path, right? I partied a lot, and there's just not a lot going on in those communities. And it's like, well, what do you do? It's like you cruise the loop and drink some beers, right?
Sure.
That's what we did as kids in small town, South Dakota. But so when I made that leap, it was definitely different because I was very, very intentional about the habits that I was creating and forming in my life. And I had to, I really did, even in that small community, had to kind of separate or sever certain relationships that I just knew were not benefiting me at all. Right. And were actually detrimental to what I knew I wanted to do and become. And by putting myself, you kind of hear you're the sum of the 5 people that you hang around with, right? If you hang around with 5 rich people, you're bound to be the 6th one. If you hang around 5 broke people, you're bound to be the 6th broke one, right? And so I knew that just from the mentorship that I had and the books that I was reading. So it was like, I wanted to surround myself with the right people. And sometimes that did take some hard decisions to sever some certain relationships, but obviously it certainly has paid off in the long run.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up. That's an important point, and I'm just going to harp on that for a moment because it's something that I believe that many of us probably hear or something that we've come across before, but do we actually put that into practice? And you did, right? You recognized that because you wanted to change. You wanted to change your life. You wanted to improve, and it's not an easy situation to look around at the people that you're surrounding yourself with and having to make tough decisions sometimes. But if you really do want to move forward, we always have to assess and reevaluate, and we're changing. We need to sometimes change who we're around also.
Right. Absolutely. There's usually, there were difficult times where, and even now that I've experienced quote unquote financial success, we'll call it that. Like I did still find myself kind of hitting those plateaus where it's like, all right, I feel like I'm a firm believer that we are always either progressing or we're regressing, mm-hmm. right? We're never in like a stay still, even right now with COVID-19, everything that's happening, it's like you are still either progressing or regressing. It's how you want to look at things. And for those companies or those entrepreneurs that have halted operations in their business and things, I really feel like they're causing some serious long-term, harm to their systems and operations that they have in place versus just buckling down, focusing on new opportunities, and seeking out how they can add additional value versus contracting, right? You're either contracting or you're expanding. And during these those certain times in my younger days, I did have to find ways to go about it tactfully about how to just separate myself from certain relationships, right? I wasn't cruel about it by any means, but it was just, I took a look at the landscape of where I was at, where I wanted to go. And I knew the only way that I could get there was to be intentional and take certain steps, which, as I mentioned, has turned out, pretty decent for me over the last 20 years now.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, so let's talk about your business for a moment. So when you strip the layers back on your business to its very essence, what is it that you do?
Yeah. Great question. Because a lot of people, sometimes my wife even says, what do you actually do?
Mine does the same, Rylee.
Right. It's like, babe, look around here. We live in a great home. Does it matter? No. But at the core of it, we get people to make decisions. right? But if we go back to why I say that is most people in nature are procrastinators, right? We just don't make decisions. We push things out, we procrastinate. And in the sales world, the decision can absolutely be no, that's fine. But I just need to know. So anybody that's in sales or has dealt with that old, well, I want to think about it. That's like the dagger to my heart. Like that's the most annoying term or phrase that we can hear being in the sales world, because there's nothing to think about. Like it's either let's do it or let's not. So we've developed a system that, at the core of the social dynamic selling system, why I even named it that was because in any given situation, there's a social dynamic that's taking place. Right. And even this, we're on a video stream here, but there's still a dynamic that's taking place. In a group setting, there's even a more dynamic. You can even take it to the extent of, if you go out to a restaurant and have dinner, there's the server, the other patrons there, there's maybe the bartender, the hostess, and everybody's having a conversation. There's a dynamic, there's an energy in the room that you can feel. Or if you go to church, right, you walk in, there's the greeters, maybe the ushers, the pastor, the rest of the congregation. There's a dynamic that's taking place there. And we've been able to utilize that and put that, just create a setting, an atmosphere where people can make a decision, right? Because nobody wants to be sold anything, but everybody wants to buy, right? So if we can naturally create an environment where people just want to buy, or if maybe they don't, right? That's fine, because in any given sales situation, we hear some will, some won't, so what, right? Like you're always going to have a group of people that are going to buy no matter what. There's going to be a group of people that are not going to buy anything, even if you literally give it to them for free. And then there's that happy medium. And our job as sales professionals is to create that environment to gain that know, like, and trust. That's what we coach a very, very, highly on gaining that know, like, and trust, because sales today is not what it used to be, right? The old razzle dazzle salesman, try to, spin the paper around and get you to sign on the dotted line, or, the Ben Franklin close. Like that stuff does not work today. Buyers are so much more educated. They know all the tactics and tricks, and it's about being authentic and creating that environment where they know you, they like you, because people want to do business with not only that they know and like, but they ultimately trust, right? And that's really what we've become very good at, as far as creating that social dynamic, that environment where it's very non-pressure, right? It's because this is a two-step process, more typically, that we take this approach with, in which they're coming out to a neutral environment. We're delivering a presentation. We're feeding them a great meal, right, at typically a local restaurant. And then we're asking for the follow-up appointment. So if we did a good enough job, we gained that know, like, and, a little bit of trust. Now they've given us the ability, because the law of reciprocity has come into play there. I've given them a free dinner. Now they're going to give me the ability to present price, or, the project, or whatever it is that we're trying to ultimately accomplish here or sell. I've gained that right to meet with them one-on-one, and now we're friends, right? We just spent 2 hours together the evening prior. So I don't have to take somebody from A to Z. Now we can get down right to the nitty-gritty and see if it's a good fit for them.
Wonderful. So walk us through, if you will, what the process looks like. So if I could be a potential client for you, how would you engage with me? How would I find out about one of these events coming up, and talk to our audience about what the events look like, what they feel like, and
Sure.
Also what is being sold? Could it be a number of different products and services? So maybe
Yeah.
pull the shroud back on that a little bit as
Yeah,
well.
absolutely. Well, let me even take you back to how I transitioned from my own companies to, like I still have my own companies today that are really on autopilot. Tonight, what do we have? It's Tuesday night. Yeah, I know tonight we have 46 events happening tonight within my own companies throughout the country here. With over in those typically have, I just looked at these numbers earlier. Every single one of those has at a minimum 12 people attending. So usually anywhere to 12 to 30 attendees at these events. But let me take you back. So about 5-6 years ago, things were great. right? Like life was good. We've made millions of dollars doing this. We'd just built a home and life was good from the outside looking in, right? As somebody's like, man, they've got it all put together. They can do what they want, buy what they want, and it doesn't seem to be a problem. But I remember so clearly, it was a Wednesday evening. I was driving home, just returned from another week on the road. Cause typically we're out doing events Mondays, Tuesdays, closing deals Wednesdays, and then we're back home. Right. So it's all of my reps. They like work hard, they play hard. 3.5 days. I tell them, give me everything for 3 days. And then I don't want to talk to you until the next Monday. Right. So that's how we roll. But I came home on a Wednesday night and I just had this feeling of unfulfillment within me. And what I mean by that is, if anybody's made a decent amount of money here, you don't even have to make it. It's not always about the money, right? And unless you don't have enough of it, and then it tends to always be about the money, right? But financially, things were great for us. But I was driving home, and I had multiple companies going at this time, multiple sales reps throughout the country, but I did not have any passion or really care about any of the products that I was actually selling. Right. And some of these were great products, like in the energy conservation world, we were helping people save money on their utility bills. Right. In the aging in place industry, we were helping people stay in their home, retrofitting their homes with like stair lifts and barrier-free showers, things along those lines. And these are great. They're all helping people, but I really didn't care. Like I needed to, obviously I'm not going to sell something that is, morally unethical. Right. But so they were great products. We're helping people, but I didn't care about it. What I cared about was providing for my family. And I would guess most listeners will do whatever that takes to provide for their family. Right. It was my passion. But I remember my wife and daughter were already asleep, and I was sat down at my kitchen table and I was like, man, it's just kind of this feeling of unfulfillment was just kind of overtaking me. And I thought back to the early days of when I first started out in sales, and even just that entrepreneurship journey, and that constant struggle, or that feast and famine lifestyle of where's my next lead going to come from, let alone my next sale. Where are these going to come from? Right. Because you can have the greatest product in the world. You can have the greatest service in the world, but if nobody knows about it, you're not helping yourself, let alone anybody else.
Sure.
Right. I don't care what that movie says. If you build it, they do not come. Right. You've got to go out and get them. You need a lead, a generator that constantly is filling your business with a consistent supply of leads and then ultimately sales. Because if you just have a great idea or a great product or a great service, I'll tell you, you don't have a business until money is coming in and out. Right. There's transactions happening. You don't have a business.
It's a hobby at best.
At best. Exactly right, Jay. And I thought, man, there are so many people out there that were young, just like I'm still fairly young. I just turned 35, but have a great idea, great product. They just don't know how to reach the masses, right? That marketing and that sales kind of marriage. Like, how do we get somebody and to take them down a buying path to create an environment in which they want to, purchase my product or my service? And I thought, man, could I actually teach this? And I started to write down everything that I had learned, starting back from that very first ad that I responded to, how do we identify our true client avatar? Like, what are we selling, right? What are we truly selling? How do we get to the benefits of the benefits? Because a lot of your listeners have probably heard, like, people don't buy a drill because they want a drill, right? Nobody just wants a drill. What they want is what the drill is going to provide. So they want the hole in the wall, right? But we go so much deeper with our clients in getting to the benefits of the benefits, because nobody wants a hole in the wall. What's a hole in your wall going to do, right? You need to be able to put the screw in the wall or the nail, whatever it is. But that's still not going to do you anything. You need to be able to hang the picture, right? But why does somebody even want the picture hung? It's that feeling of pride or that warmth that you get when you enter the home, right? So it's the benefits of the benefits of the benefits. And how do we get people to make a decision to want that product or service, right? How do we get them to show up to an event? How do we negotiate with restaurants? How do we set the room up? How do we design a presentation? How do we create sense of urgency, the follow up and follow through process? And I just started to write everything out. And that was really the birth of social dynamic selling. And actually the book you had mentioned, that the #1 bestseller on Amazon, it's Food for Thought, which is really how to use dinner seminar marketing to grow your business in ways you never thought possible. And that's when I really transitioned out of owning my own companies, doing it. I still have them, great, because I'm a firm believer that I hate that phrase that those that can't teach, right? We fly in the face of that, where every single, not every week nowadays for me, but at least once a month, I'm out doing my own dinners and my seminars, because I want to know the ins and outs of the complexities that especially when we went from shutting down restaurants to transitioning opening, I was at it full time, learning how people are responding and reacting to being out in group settings again, because I need to be able to coach and teach my clients how to do this. And that's really what we do and we focus on now is teaching people our system, right? Whatever your product or your service is, we teach this system on how to identify that true client, how to get them to take action, and then lead them on a buying path, an emotional journey to ultimately want to do business with you. Does that answer the question, Jay?
It does answer the question. I appreciate that. I love the concept behind it and the thought that you put into it. And, when you reach that point where you're sitting there at the kitchen table, like you just explained, and you're not feeling fulfilled, and you're really doing the deep work, asking yourself tough questions and trying to figure out, how do I navigate around this? I'm seeing some success, but I don't have that level of fulfillment that I know I can have. I know I can do more, I can be more, I can give more. And so, you had to go through that process to break through that pain to come up with where you are today. And what an amazing experience that you've had. So since you brought this up about ideal clients, it's an excellent segue. How do you respond to those who say that anyone who can fog a mirror is their ideal client?
I would ask them, how's that working out for them? Right? Because if I'm getting them on, if they're calling me, usually they're looking for help, right? And if it is anybody who can fog a mirror, great. Like, okay, you're selling, mattresses? I'm thinking of the most vague thing. You're selling toilet paper, like everybody needs it, right? Okay. But you can, if you have an existing client base, right, you can reverse engineer this thing. If you're already selling something to someone and you've collected any sort of data on that, you're going to be able to know, or at least have a best guess of, it's like, you know what, now that I think about this, it is, if I'm looking at the, date of births here or whatever, it's pretty much age 40 to 45, males or, females. It depends upon the data that you have, but you can reverse engineer that. If you're a startup, you have no clue, like, who is your ideal client, right? We all want that product that's like everybody can purchase it, right? But who is that ideal client? Who is this going to benefit the most, right? And then we try to figure out who that person actually is, and then where are they, right? And it might not be even geographically, where are they, right? Because if you're selling a product online, it could be anybody, right? It could be all over the world for that matter. But when I ask where are they, I want to figure out, where do they shop? Like, what are their buying habits? What other things do they buy? Can I attach myself with another affiliate or of some, so I want to figure out who that ideal person is, and then where do they shop? And then, demographically, we know where they are, geographically, where they're going to shop. Now, how do they make decisions, right? And how are they going to respond? Is it an online funnel? Is it Facebook ads? Is it direct mail? Man, Jay, we do, I can't even tell you the millions of pieces of direct mail. This week alone, I'm probably mailing out between 300,000 and 400,000 pieces of direct mail just this week alone. And part of it that is really just dependent upon where that person shops and how they make buying decisions, right? And why I love direct mail is because right now it's one of the going into the elections right now, it's a little bit more cluttered. But for the most part, from the marketing world, it's a much less cluttered platform than anything online, right? Because everybody is online now. It's like, you got to be online. You got to have ads and everything online, SEO, build out your ClickFunnels page, everything like that. And it's like, man, if I can create a great invitation, right? That's because if I'm inviting them to a dinner seminar, for example, I can create a nice invitation that's personalized to, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, you're cordially invited out to the Ruth's Chris Steakhouse, whatever it is. And then I'm gonna use verbiage and language on how I've, gone about learning how they talk, like how they make buying decisions, right? So the copy that we write, there's a lot of thought that goes into this on getting them making that to make that decision. Because we have 6 measurables that we track through any given campaign that allows us to not be in the day and day of it, but I can take a peek from, right here in my home office right now. I can look at our funnels, right? What we call kind of an on or offline funnel of how my teams are doing or how my clients are doing simply based upon the numbers, right? I love the metrics of these programs, and direct mail is an easy one to measure, right? If I send 5,000 pieces and I get 50 responses, it's okay. I got a 1% response rate. Perfect. Versus online or even email, it's just so cluttered, right? And it's all about impressions. And there's great things that you can do to retarget. But oftentimes from a straight return on investment standpoint, I always have a much higher ROI on direct mail than I've had anything online, which is surprising, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. That's very interesting. The typical conversion rate is relatively low, but I think the difference here, what I'm hearing, is that you spend a significant amount of time doing your due diligence, right? You're probably testing different messages. You're constantly evolving and learning more about those that respond accordingly. So what connected with them, and how can we study that even more and deliver the right kind of message that's going to get someone to respond, to come to an event, and then ultimately listen to what we have to say.
You got it. You hit it right on the head, because that's those 6 measurables that I was talking about. We have our response rate, right? Like if I'm going to send out X amount of pieces, what type of response did I get? And then we've got, just because they respond doesn't mean that we're actually getting them to show up, right? So we need to get the actual RSVP rate, or the show up rate, we'll call it, to the actual event. And then we're delivering that presentation, or excuse me, before, I want to step back, make sure that was clear. The response rate, the RSVP rate, right? So just because they call in to gather more information doesn't necessarily mean that we may have said something wrong on the phone, right? We have a 24/7 call center that we record, and we can pull these calls, and we can learn and listen and coach our call center staff along the way of the scripting that we use. It's important. The words we say are extremely important, and how we say them even more so important. And then the actual show up rate for the events. And there's a lot of things that could happen here. For instance, I'm in Minnesota right now, and man, February here in Minnesota, you're hosting an event, and cold front comes through, and we've got a little, blizzard, which is not out of the ordinary. That could hinder the show up rate, right? Even though it's a way of life up here for a lot of people. So a lot of them just will venture out no matter what. But then we have we delivered the presentation. Great. Now, how good of a presentation did we do? Was it dynamic enough to get them to know, like, and trust you, to get that appointment rate, right? If we've now got that next day, that follow-up appointment. And then how many of those actually stick? Because just because they gave it to you, to your face, doesn't mean that they necessarily aren't going to cancel when you call, or aren't going to show up, right? Usually it's us going to them, but sometimes it's coming into an office or a clinical setting or something like that. And then how many of those actually purchase? Right. And then the very, very last one would be like that stick rate, or that word that nobody in the sales world likes to hear, that cancellation rate. Sure. Right. Yeah. And we measure all of those, because if it still should be that funnel, right? You should have a wide top, and it's going to be narrowing down to the 5, 6, 7 sales each week that I'm hoping to get. Right. And if at any time there is a bulge in that funnel, or something doesn't flow, we know where we need to coach and help people with, right? And my job is to get as many people in the top of that funnel as possible. And then we can coach with the words we say, the language, how we say them, from the sales process, creating sense of urgency, to getting people to just want to do business with us. So those are the type of things that we coach on and help our clients just from an ongoing standpoint.
Yeah, I love it. I'd really like to dig into the science of social dynamics for a moment, if we can. So, this is clearly an area that you've been studying pretty deeply, and there's a psychology involved. There's a psychology involved to everything, but there's certainly a psychology involved to sales and social dynamics. Can you speak to that for a moment or two, and some of the key learnings that
Oh yeah.
that you've acquired, and how you're applying that, and why that's so important?
Yeah, absolutely. This is what I geek out to, Jay. And I actually have a second book we're releasing it in 2 weeks from now, called Intentional Influence. And it's basically I've became a master practitioner and studied very in depth NLP, or neuro linguistic programming, if you're familiar. For those that aren't familiar with it, or maybe have kind of a bad taste, they're like, ooh, that's like that black magic stuff. It's not the case at all. Just because it's online or you can Google it doesn't mean it's actually true, right? So
one of the things that put Tony Robbins on the map.
absolutely. He is the master at it. And he does it in arenas with 12,000 people. Think about that social dynamic. I mean, the guy is a machine. But anyways, I love learning how and why people make buying decisions. Like, these are the what I lay in bed and think about at night. It's like, why did somebody choose this versus this? And this is why, from a marketing standpoint, in a sales standpoint, there needs to be continuity in all of it, right? If at any flow, because if in the corporate world, usually the marketing team will blame the sales team that they're not selling, and the sales team blames the marketing team that the leads aren't any good, right? And it's like, there has to be a marriage and a continuity, and it's not 50-50, it's 100 and 100 between these two. And this is how we approach all of our campaigns anytime we onboard a new client, because the words that we say, right, only about 7%, when it comes to communication, only about 7% of what you're receiving are the literal words that I'm saying, right? And then there's the tonality, and then the physiology, or the body language, that makes up. So there's 7% is words, right? And then physiology, the body language. This is why I stand when I do these podcasts, right? Because even if they're not watching me, I imagine they can hear, when I have a voice inflection, right? Or the tonality is the other percentage that makes this up of how people receive information. And a prime example would be, if anybody in a relationship, have you ever texted your spouse or significant other and got a weird response where it's like, I'm not sure how to take that? Is that like do you get that K, or is it okay? Or it's like, ooh, did I put tone on that, or did she put tone on that? And it's like, oh my goodness. So this is why, even with our sales reps, when I communicate with them when they're on the road, we use an app called Voxer, right? Which is like you could do voice, you could send a voice message, but I like Voxer because it's almost like a walkie-talkie, where I can, if they say, hey, this is what this person just said, I was gonna, how would you combat that? I can actually respond and give them my tonality, that voice inflection of how it should be said, not just, what should be said, if that makes sense.
It does.
So,
yeah.
Perfect. So speaking to that subconscious, and this is where we really get in depth with our clients on being able to speak to the subconscious, on creating that environment in which people, just for whatever reason, they really like you and they want to do business with you. And oftentimes that is because you're speaking the same language that they can receive, right? We all have that. There, and especially in a group setting, there's visual learners, there's auditory learners, and then kinesthetic learners, right? So sitting one-on-one with somebody, I can usually pick that up just by the words that they use. Like if they're starting to use words like, I see what you're saying, or see, that's a visual cue, right? Or I just I don't hear what you're saying, right? And so I'm going to use these type of words from a visual standpoint, an auditory standpoint, or kinesthetic would be more that feel. I don't feel like, I don't feel what you're saying, right? So in a group setting, a lot of people teach people to read body language, and we teach people to speak body language, right? So when you're selling to a group of people, speaking, hitting all components to a group allows you to reach the masses versus just that one-on-one conversation and speaking their language. And this is how we've been able to take our conversion rates from, early on, not that great because I wasn't speaking everybody's language, to now I'm reaching the masses. And at the end of it, for whatever reason, a lot of those people in the room they just like me, right? Because people want to do business with those that they know and like.
Wow, that is That is super powerful. So I've got to ask you then. So, you started to see some results early on, but then there were some actions that you took that you began to see significant and exponential growth. What was it? What was it? Learning more about an NLP? Was it what were you reading? What were you studying? What were you absorbing at that time?
Mm-hmm. Early on, I mean, if you go back to my early 15, 16, 17, 18, it was a lot of mindset books that I was reading, right?
Give me
Like
an example.
vision.
Give me an example if you can.
One of the greatest books I ever read was called The Science of Success, James Arthur Ray. And he talks about these 7 power principles, and I forget the other 7 now. It's been a while since I read this book, but it was a lot of it was about mindset and having a vision for, whatever it is, for the day, for the month, the year, but how to put yourself, and why, Michael Jordan, we hear a lot about, he would literally sit in the locker room and he would visualize the entire game before it ever happened, right? But what he would do, he wouldn't visualize it as a spectator watching. He was literally visualizing him dribbling up the court, taking the shots, putting himself in the present tense. And this is why when we do goal setting exercises and anything, we're speaking it in the present tense, not like one day I will have this, or I hope to obtain this, or even a big thing. It's so many people, when we ask about what they do want, I always get what they don't want. Right. And this is just that, and this is, if anybody has watched or listened to The Secret, was the kind of the big rage a decade ago or whatever that was. But this was where a lot of that is like, we attract, our thoughts are literal energy, right? It is, if a thought is a thing, and it's energy, right? So the thoughts that we have, whether they're subconsciously or conscious thoughts, they're things. Right. So when we talk about what we're trying to look for and what our goals are, if I was to ask somebody or any of our clients or even our sales reps, when we train on this, it's like, what is your goal here? What do you want to get out of this? And it's like, well, I just don't want to be in debt anymore. The only thing that the subconscious cannot understand or process a negative, right? So when you're telling me what you don't want, you're really just telling me what you do want, right? Because a negative is not processed by the subconscious. So that was early on. Understanding that my thoughts are so powerful, and how I think, and why I think I even experienced highs and lows was because I found myself literally the actions and thoughts that I was creating in my own life was causing these kind of highs and lows, and understanding how to use those for me versus against me was crucial. Right. But then it was moving into tactical things on just how people communicate. If there's anything that anybody could learn, even above and beyond vision and mindset, is how to communicate effectively with people, right? Especially if you're in a relationship. And even my podcast, we call it the Sales Conversion Podcast. And it's not just for people in sales, right? Because if I don't care what business you think you are in sales. If you're an IT guy, if you are a mailman, if you're a stay-at-home husband, a stay-at-home wife, you're in sales. Right? You are selling somebody something. You just happen to have this product, right? Or you just happen to be a mom or a dad, right? Because I'm selling my wife every single day on why she shouldn't leave me, right? It's like, I've got to, but that was the mindset that I put myself in, because it was, I want to be able to authentically influence people, right? And no matter what, if you're trying to get the mailman to bring your mail to the door versus put it out at the box, like that's, if you can communicate effectively and create an environment where he just naturally wants to do that because he really likes you, that's one of the most important skills that anybody could learn, is to be able to influence a situation or a room. It doesn't have to be in a boardroom or in a sales setting, but just in a natural, any everyday setting, right? That's going to be one of the most important skills that anybody could learn, is how to effectively communicate with people.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I want to mention one thing, and I hate to interrupt you, but it's an important point that you just made. You used the words authentically influence, not manipulate.
Right.
Authentically influence. So I want to make sure that as people are listening to this and they're listening to the science and the social dynamics and all that's involved here, this is not manipulation. Manipulation has there's a negative intent, right?
Absolutely.
You're trying to force something on someone. That's a very different approach, and that's not what we're talking about here.
Right. Yeah. I'm glad you said that, Jay. I sometimes gloss over that. Is that absolutely, this isn't like, if anybody's been to those events where it's like rah, 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 razzle dazzle, rush to the back of the room, swipe your credit card for this $48 regret, right? Like, this is not what we coach and teach on at all. I could probably help fill the room with that, but I'm not going to help in that sales process. I want to teach people how to be authentic and how to influence people in a manner that they like you, they know you, they like you, they trust you, right? And being able to just use science, as you mentioned, just the little things on why people communicate better from a visual standpoint or an auditory standpoint or kinesthetic, and being able to, even a prime example, why Disney is so magical, right? Whenever you go, and I know people aren't going to be able to necessarily see this unless they're watching this on YouTube or wherever, but whenever you walk into a Disney resort or Disneyland, Disney World, right? Don't they, whenever they open the door, you'll always see them open the door with their palm open, right? Because statistically, I don't know this exact statistic. I'm going to look this up so I can use this later. But statistically, this is a much more warmer and welcoming greeting versus like this, right? They're not going to say, come on in, and point you direction. It's welcome to the resort. And palm is always open. And that's just a natural, inviting feeling. And these are just little things that you can learn on how to get people to know, like, and trust you, right? Because that's ultimately how you build rapport and you connect with people so quickly, is by doing these little things. And these are skills that can be learned, right? This isn't something that I knew out the gates. I had to fall and stumble my way into learning these type of skills and techniques that has allowed me to excel. And it's proven very well, not only in business and financially things are great, but just in my relationship with my wife, right? My relationship with my 8-year-old daughter, right? I mean, it's so important to be able to learn how to effectively communicate. And when I say that, it's not just like talking, but receiving, how to effectively listen, right? And listening skills are just as important as speaking skills when it comes to actual communication.
Yeah, you're definitely speaking my language, Rylee. This is really powerful information, and I'm so glad we're having the conversation and that you're sharing it in the way that you are. So, and we touched on this earlier when you were mentioning about the pandemic, and you were looking at your calendar of events for tonight as an example. How has the pandemic impacted your business? What's going well? What are some of the challenges that you've experienced, and what have you learned through the pandemic? Are there things that you're doing differently today than what you were doing prior to COVID-19?
Yeah, most definitely. I'll take you back to that day where we got the notification that restaurants were closing down, right? It was March, 15th or 16th, I think it was. I was in Arizona, of all places, and I was on, my wife and I were supposed to be on vacation this week. We had a nice little resort and going to be poolside. And all of a sudden we get this notification. We were kind of monitoring it going, there's no way that could happen, right? They're not going to close down restaurants. And we got the news, and that week we had 107 events already booked and already paid for. I had hundreds of thousands of dollars that I got zero return on that investment. So most people would say, okay, catastrophic, we're dead. What do we got to do? And it was exact opposite for us. And in our team, it's we're going to come to every situation solution minded and not going to complain about like, woe is us. So it's like, how do we get stuff online? Let's pivot. I never heard that word more often than during that couple month of like, everybody's pivoting, right? So we got stuff online. We had webinars, and they were converting to an extent, right? But anybody who tells you, that even does webinars, you're never going to have the conversion rate online versus one-on-one. There's nothing, especially now that we're back doing events, Man, oh man, Jay, like people, that human interaction, just that connection, even if it is a pound or an elbow, right? Not the actual handshake anymore. People are craving it and they want that social interaction. It's a human need. I don't care if you're an introvert or an extrovert, you still need that human interaction in some fashion. And that's where, when we were able to get the go ahead, we watched every state very, very particular on which ones had less restrictions. And we started out in the Carolinas the second week of May. And then we started to roll out, we were in South Dakota that next week. And all of our clients, if they had the ability to do business, we were rolling out those states. And happy to say now we're 100% back at it. Things are better than ever. We've tweaked a few different things. We've learned different things on our marketing. You know, we're still abiding by all the social distancing guidelines and things like that. Some states are still more restrictive on capacity, but that's what we do. We stay on the forefront of all that, and make sure that obviously we're not putting anybody in any harm's way, regardless of your beliefs of the pandemic or plandemic, whatever you want to call it. We're still operating within an umbrella. I respect the establishment that we have to, rules that we have to abide by, but I can still play my game within those rules. And that's what I think any entrepreneur is good at, right? It's finding an opportunity, identifying a need, maybe. How do we create a want? Because I think people don't buy what they need, they buy what they want, right? And so creating that want in that environment, and then we were able to do that, and it has allowed us to excel. I mean, business is better than ever for us. It's actually allowed me to open up other opportunities during that time period. And that's where early on when I said we're either progressing or we're regressing, and it's making best use of your time. I knew I wasn't going to be out flying around the country doing these dinner events, so I buckled down and I worked my butt off, creating different forms of revenue within our businesses, not only for me personally, but for all of my sales guys and my employees. Because I took that so serious when they said things are shutting down. It was like, we're not laying off a soul here. We're going to keep this thing going. We'll figure it out one way or the other. And we were absolutely able to do that. And things haven't been any better than ever.
Man, I tell you what, I am so thrilled to hear that. And I'm just going to highlight again, and this has been brought up multiple times during this conversation, and that is around mindset. Now, I typically spend time talking to each guest about mindset because it's such an important and foundational part of any business, and especially successful businesses. And the fact that you and your team, when March hit and you looked at what was happening in the world and in your space, and you were looking for solutions, right? You didn't crumble.
Right.
You didn't look at the situation and say, now what are we going to do, right? We have no options here. There's always a solution if you're looking at it through the right optics. And you and your team were hyper focused on finding the solutions. That is having the right mindset. And I love that. That is so powerful. And hence the reason why you're in the position that you are today and as successful as you are in your businesses. That is outstanding.
Yeah. Thanks, Shane. I really think you'd mentioned the team, and there's, I don't want any of this to sound anything like I'm God's gift to this or so great at this. This is everything that I've done has been learned. But one of the most important things, if I could share with anybody, one of the best things that I've been able to do is obviously learning how to authentically communicate effectively with people, right? And that has allowed me to get into situations or put myself into situations that I attracted the right people, and has allowed me to hire the culture and the atmosphere that we have within our company and all of our organizations, even the clients that we coach. That is so key in creating that culture that we're a family, and everything that we do, this is family. And that's why I took that so seriously when things were going down. It was like, we're gonna lock arms here. We're gonna figure this out as a family. And that's what we're able to do. And that was, surrounding yourself with those right people. And that goes back to the very, very first conversation we had, Jay. It was like, sometimes you got to cut out the fat in your life, right? And some of your listeners may be dealing with that right now, and it's a hard decision to make. But I promise you, the only way that you're going to be able to step into that next area, that next level of your life, is sometimes you just gotta, you gotta cut the anchor, right? Some of those are, look at them as anchors, and that's going to allow you to swim to that next level or area in your life.
Couldn't have said it better. Absolutely. Rylee, what are you most proud of today?
Man, I think it has zero to do with any business, any financial, anything. I mean, early on, like that's what you're always grasping at. It's like everybody thinks like success is money, right? And that's definitely has allowed me to create an environment and a lifestyle that is successful, right? But the only reason that I've desired to do any of that was for my family. I have an 8.5-year-old. If she heard me say 8, she would chastise me because she's 8.5, right? She's in 3rd grade. I mean, I couldn't be more proud of the girl, the woman that she's becoming and developing into. And the relationship with my wife early on, it was so hard, right? But we didn't know how to communicate. We were like opposites in how to communicate. Like she's a nurse anesthetist, so super type A. I'm pretty type A, and we're like trying to tell each other what's up, right? And we weren't coming at it with a team mentality, and that we're in this forever, right? And I think it's the relationships that I've been able to build in my life, and not just my family, but the team, the culture, my biological family, we'll call it, or married into family, but the culture of our family within our clients and our sales reps is absolutely what I'm most proud of.
Beautiful. And what message would you like to leave our listeners with?
Seek out a mentor, hire a coach, no matter what age you are, right? Sometimes you can look at it and it's hard to justify spending a little bit of money on that. And if it is like, you don't have to go thousands and thousands of dollars. Like I have a financial coach that helps me and guides me with investments, right? I've got a fitness coach in my life. And it's not that I don't know what I need to do. I've got a business coach. I have a relationship coach. I've strategically put these people in my life, not because I don't know what's best to do, but because I need accountability. And sometimes I need a sounding board that can tell me, nah, do you even hear what you're saying, dude? And most importantly, that cannot be my wife, right? There's a time and a place. We have our Sundays where we sit down and we're recapping and we're going through life and planning the next week. But sometimes that emotional connection can interfere with how we make decisions or how we respond and react. And to have those people in my life that I know that I can have an unbiased opinion about maybe how to look into my business or look into my relationship, look into my fitness, what I'm eating, why I'm doing that, I can receive that a lot better. And anytime I've invested money, I actually take it seriously. So that's really what has launched me in all areas of my life, is surrounding myself. And if it wasn't somebody that was just like a buddy or a friend, I had to buck up and pay money to have that person in my life. And those are the best investments I've ever had.
Fantastic, and a great message, and I appreciate you sharing that. And as a business improvement coach, I couldn't agree with you more. So thank you for sharing that. So before I ask my final question to you, where can we go to connect with you? Where can we go to consume your content? And also, I don't want to forget this, you have a brand new book that's going to be released. When that's released, can you please share a link with me that I can send back out to our audience? Because I think that's going to be an excellent topic, and I can't wait to delve into that one.
Yeah, absolutely. So a number of different places that they can find me. Socialdynamicselling.com is going to be, very basic, or RyleeMeek.com. My name is spelt a little different, RYLEEMEEK. And you can just search me there. If I'm on most social media platforms. But what's worked best lately is just text me. My phone number I'm happy to give out here, Jay, is 727-472-3860. And we'll provide you with some, if not daily, at least some weekly kind of motivation, and any updates of the book and things that we'll be launching. We've got a Win Big in Business challenge that we have launching going into this last quarter of the year. That we're helping, not just business owners, but in all areas of life, Because if you are a business owner, an entrepreneur, in any of the other areas of your life are a little off kiltered or just they're not lining up, it's going to affect your business, right? So that's why we call this challenge the Win Big in Business Challenge. But it has to deal with all components: your mental, your emotional, your spiritual, your financial, and then we had all components that are going to help you excel going into 2021.
Terrific. Well, we will link to all of those areas in the show notes. So here is my final question to you. What is one piece of advice that you can share with our audience that's had a massive impact on your own life?
Piece of advice that's had a massive impact on my life. I think it comes back to that coaching and that mentoring, right? And it wasn't early on. I'm 15, 16, 17. I had no money to invest into anything. And so I had to seek that out. But what I learned is I had to be very intentional at it, right? We are all called to excellence in our lives, no matter what you do. If you think of like your business or your job or your career, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. You are called to excellence. You're called to be the most excellent husband you can be, the most excellent wife you can be, the most excellent father that you can be. And to do anything less than that is a waste, a complete waste. And in being intentional, setting your daily routine, your weekly routine, your monthly routine, setting that up, being intentional about that is going to get you to the next level, right? Just letting life come at you is not a way to be progressing. You got to go after it and go get it. Be intentional with everything that you do, knowing that what you're doing today is going to show up in your life 30, 60, 90 days down the road.
Outstanding. Thank you so much for sharing that. And Rylee, I'm thrilled that we had the opportunity to have this conversation. I'm grateful for you. Thank you so much for being here today and for sharing so many wonderful insights and sharing of your knowledge and experience. I greatly do appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. This has been fun, man.
Fantastic. And for the rest of you, thank you so very much for watching. And if you found value in this episode, please like and share with your friends and also subscribe to this channel. And until next time, stay healthy and optimistic. Keep learning and growing. Find a mentor and a coach. And remember that transformative change in your life and business always begins with you, and nothing happens until you take action. And we will see you on the next episode of Business Minds Coffee Chat. Take care.